Who made Bombay rich? Ask anyone, and he'll tell you that possibly the Gujaratis, maybe the Marwadis, in fact, or maybe it was the Parsis. In fact, all the three answers could be wrong because the man who really made Bombay rich was a Jew, a man called David Sassoon. And many people don't know much about him. David Sassoon was a kind of refugee from Baghdad. He was a Baghdadi Jew. Things got very, very uncomfortable in Baghdad. For Jews, his father was a very big man. He was almost an advisor to the ruler at that time. But when things got uncomfortable and the new ruler wanted to arrest David Sassoon and try to demand a ransom for him, he decided to run away. He ran away from Baghdad, came the land route, and into Bombay. Why did he come to Bombay? And this is one lesson that many people, politicians and administrators, do not remember. David Sassoon came to Bombay because Bombay had law and order, it had peace, it had all communities coming in together. Business grows when there's law and order, when there's peace, and when there's a mingling of all communities, a lesson that people forget. When David Sassoon arrived in Bombay in 1828, the population was just a few lakhs. In fact, Bombay was not an important city till about maybe 40 years before. But two things happened. Aurangzeb died in 1707. Surat was the most important city then. But with Aurangzeb's death, law and order deteriorated and business ran away from Surat and all of them came to Bombay. Bombay, the British were there. The British promised law and order. The British promised peace. And everyone came here. David Sassoon knew about this and he came here. David Sassoon used to handle textiles and trading in Baghdad. So when he came to India, he asked his British principals, saying, I used to sell your fabric there in the Middle East and the whole of the African continent. Can I continue doing that in India? And the British said, yes, you've been an old friend. Why not? Now, when he started importing textiles and selling in India, he ran into the Parsis who thought they controlled the textile trade. And the Parsis, because they're fair-skinned and spoke English, had been given concessions in almost all the docks, right from the Princess Dock to Balad Estate. And David Sassoon found it difficult to get his ships a parking place, a berth in these areas. So he said that for trading, I'll have to start thinking something different. And that is why he decided that he would build his own port. And that was the Sassoon Dock in Colaba. The dock took a long time to build, and it was finished a few years after his death, completed. But even during when he was alive, he did two important things. One, he set up the dock. And two, he made sure that this was the first dock where the railway line came into the dock. Why? Because it was easy for goods to come in and go out. And the British were so impressed with his dock that they decided to use that as a template for all other docks they built thereafter. Coming back to David Sassoon. When David Sassoon started working in India, as I said, he was a Jew. He knew Arabic. He knew Hebrew. He knew English, but he refused to speak English. His son spoke English. He said, no, I'm comfortable with my old language. I do not need a new language. And he started trading in textiles. And then you had the beginnings of the American Civil War. And even before it erupted in full bloom, David Sassoon knew there would be problems for England because its cotton came from America. So he told Lancashire, don't worry. Even if it stops, I will send cotton from India because India has huge stocks of cotton. So when the American Civil War actually took place in 1861 till 1865, Sassoon was already settled. He was exporting cotton, importing textiles, and thereby he made sure that he was not out of pocket because he was earning money and spending money. Even before that, he discovered one more business. He found that the Parsis were exporting opium. For the British loved Chinese tea, but they did not want to pay in silver or gold, so they decided to sell opium instead. And the Parsis got in the business. David Sassoon also got in the business, And the Parsis and David Sassoon are competing neck to neck in the opium trade, except that David Sassoon did one interesting thing. When he went to China, he made sure one of his sons, Elias, was put in China, and he developed Shanghai. Shanghai's most prosperous area is called the Bund, which is today the swankiest area. At that time, it was a swamp. The Chinese emperor said, "You will not come in the city, we'll give you a land outside the city," in a place called the Bund. And Elias went there, developed the Bund with a man called Kadoorie, who later developed Hong Kong. And together, both of them built Shanghai. So the Sassoons were responsible for two big cities, Bombay and Shanghai. And both became rich. Now, when Sassoon came here and he started exporting cotton and importing textiles, the first textile mills came up in India. The first cotton textile mills came up in Calcutta in 1818. The second one came up in Mumbai, 1854. The Tatars also got into a cotton and textile mill in Ahmedabad. He kept on watching this and he realized that textile mills were an advantage because he could use domestic cotton for producing domestic fabric. So he started setting up one textile mill after another. By the time he died, he had set up 17 textile mills in Bombay, accounting for almost 60% of Bombay's employment in these textile mills. At that time, David Sassoon owned all the lands just south of South Bombay, right up to Bhaikula, and he contributed to the building of some of the most prestigious buildings in Bombay. See the chart that you have. And in the chart, you'll find that he built the first synagogue in Bombay. And he built schools, both for education as well as for skill development. And then he built the Masina Hospital that became his first home. Of course, he later moved to Malabar Hill, where he built another big mansion, Sanssouci, and that is where his family stayed. He built another synagogue in Colaba, and of course the Sassoon Dock, which I've already talked about, and he contributed to the building of the Bank of India and the David Sassoon Library, which is a famous building even today. Sassoon's commitment to education was remarkable. And unfortunately, Sassoon did not like Bombay because the weather was too humid and too hot. So he decided to go to Pune and settle down there. And he left his second son, his eldest son, Albert, also known as Abdullah, as the in charge in Bombay. And if you go to Bhaudaji Museum today, which is next to the zoo, incidentally, all the zoo land belonged to David Sassoon. He gave that as a donation. His family gave that as a donation to Bombay. And in Bhaudaji Museum, if you go in there, you'll find a big statue 20 feet high of a man standing. And the placard says, Albert Sassoon, landlord of Bombay. And sitting before him, it's his father, David Sassoon. Sassoon went to Pune, and in Pune also he built the first synagogue, he built the hospital, he built a crematorium for the Jews, and schools, skill development centers. And there were two things remarkable with this David Sassoon. He never spoke English, and all his accounts are written in Hebrew. His schools taught Hebrew to the Jews, and those who knew Hebrew were allowed to become accountants with him so that nobody outside the community would know what his accounts were. And this practice was followed by Elias also in Shanghai. When David Sassoon died, Albert took charge. When Albert took charge, he saw his father dead, so he went off to Europe and he got integrated into the richest family of the world called the Rothschilds. He forgot Bombay. His brother, Suleiman or Solomon, took charge, but he died early, and his wife, Sarah, took charge. And this was the first woman looking after a global empire. And Sarah managed it for some time. When she died, the empire disintegrated, and different people took up the different pieces of his empire. But the man who created wealth in Bombay was David Sassoon. He even overtook Jamshedji Jiji Bhoi, who was then the richest man. He knew how to make money, but he also knew how to give the money back to society in education, in jobs, and in partnerships. I'm sure you didn't know the story, but the story has lessons for India. 1. Business grows when you live in peace. Business grows when there are good laws. Business grows when there's amity. A lesson that India needs to learn. Thank you for watching this channel. I hope you like the story. There'll be more stories coming very soon. Keep in touch. Click the subscribe button and make sure you get intimated about every podcast that we make. And of course, please tell us how we could improve. Send in your comments. We value them immensely.